your seat, settle in, and listen up. Gophers 101 is underway and in session. It's time to go to class and talk all things Gophers.
I don't know about you, Manny, but the coffee tastes exceptionally good this morning as the University of Minnesota defeats the Wisconsin Badgers yesterday at a snowy Huntington Bank Stadium by a final score of 17-7 to retain the Axe for the second year in a row and win it for the fourth time in 5 years. Manny, I'm going to eat a little crow momentarily on the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers defense, but ecstatic to be talking with you this morning because as you and I said last week, whether it's by 1 or 21, just find a way to beat Wisconsin. And I think recency bias had me overvalue Wisconsin a little bit, but we'll get to that in just moments. But I am ecstatic, and yes, the coffee tastes great this morning.
Well, you've got for our YouTube viewing audience, you've got a Gophers coffee mug. I don't have a Gophers coffee mug, but it is like maroon. So as you can see here, so that works, I think.
That tracks, and that matches both of our hoodies this morning. We're recording this on Sunday morning. Manny, actually, very quickly, let's get this out of the way. Some of you will consume this podcast before or perhaps during the first Max Brosmer start in the NFL. Could be one of only, could be one of many. So congrats to Max Brosmer making a start for the university. Wow, I clearly have not had enough coffee for the Minnesota Vikings today in Seattle. And the
University of TCO Performance Center.
And I did see, and this comes as no surprise, P.J. Fleck, I believe, will be in attendance today, as I believe he should. So good for him and good for Max Brosmer.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exciting. I think, obviously, we don't want J.J. McCarthy's concussion to be a lingering issue, because you still want to see further development from him. But I think this is a great opportunity for Max Brosmer to kind of show what he's got. And, he's been, I know they're pretty excited about what he's done so far for the Vikings in practice and training camp and all that stuff. So it'll be cool to see him get a start. Tall order, a tough opponent today, but it should be intriguing to watch.
Could you pick a worse place to make your first start, right? At Seattle.
Against a good Seahawks team.
Correct.
A really good Seahawks team.
It is an incredibly difficult place to hear and communicate, but we all wish Max the best. And just think about his meteoric rise, by the way. From New Hampshire to Big Ten football to NFL starting quarterback again. I don't know how many starts he'll get in the NFL. Hopefully he gets a lot. But just to be able to go from starting at New Hampshire to starting a game in the NFL within 2 calendar years, pretty good deal for him. Okay, let's get into the Gophers and Badgers from Huntington Bank Stadium. The Gophers complete just an odd season, 7-0 at home, 0-5 on the road. They'll get another chance to win away from home, but technically a neutral site game when they'll play in a bowl game roughly 3-4 weeks from now, looking like it will definitely be one of those post-Christmas, but before January 1st bowls, perhaps the Pinstripe against an ACC team, perhaps even Nashville against an SEC team. And don't even bother predicting what that game's going to look like, because I don't think we have any idea what opt-outs will look like, because technically the transfer portal is not open. That doesn't mean that players won't choose to just not play in the game. So we'll get to all that. I think you and I will do a show and talk about the bowl game here in the coming days when we know that, probably late next Sunday, sometime in the following week. I thought yesterday was, for the Gophers, I think best case scenario. I really do. I think the conditions for everybody were borderline impossible, but it was another classic Gophers performance for this season, Manny, when at the end of the game, you look at the box score, and if you just looked at the box score and you just looked at total yards, you might say, well, Wisconsin won. But you'd have to scan further down the box score. And again, you would have to see that Wisconsin not much more, but was the slightly more penalized team. And they turned the ball over, in which another theme for the Gophers this year, Manny, not only do they win at home, when they win Big Ten games this year, 4 of the 5 Big Ten wins this year. Listen to this, Manny. Outgained by Rutgers slightly, but they won the turnover battle and won the game. Outgained by Purdue by almost 200 yards.
Yeah.
But they won the turnover battle by 3, and they won the penalties battle by 50 yards, and they won the game. Michigan State, outgained by over 100 yards. Again, they won the penalty margin by almost 90 yards. Yesterday against Wisconsin, not as egregious, outgained by 50 yards, but again, really difficult conditions for both teams. I was surprised at how well the teams moved the ball, in all honesty, for the most part.
Especially Wisconsin.
Correct. But Wisconsin with 3 crippling turnovers, one that obviously hurt a lot more that led to the Jamison Gears touchdown. And that has just been the recipe for the Gophers this year. And I don't understand. Maybe you have more context because you were, I believe, watching the game. I didn't even text you. Apologies. I was there. I don't quite understand what Wisconsin was doing at quarterback, and scanning their podcast last night, it sounds like a lot of the people that follow their program wasn't quite sure what Wisconsin was doing at quarterback yesterday. But again, a defense that I ripped and have ripped for most of the year. I don't care if the conditions aided in it. They tackled really well. They played really well. They had the one big passing play that they gave up. Well, that's going to happen to pretty much every team, almost every game. I think it's a victory that easily could have been more than 10 points. And we're waking up, Manny. These things should continue to be celebrated. I know there's a lot of people that are starting to be out on P.J. Fleck. They're not as happy as they used to be. I get all that. To a degree, I think some of it's understandable. But the guy has a winning record, slightly, 5-4 against Wisconsin. But more importantly, for the last 5. It's not like it's 5-4, but has gone 4 of the last 5 the other way.
Right.
He has won 4 of the last 5 against your number one rival. And I don't care what the Wisconsin program looks like while you're doing that. This program didn't win this game for almost a decade and a half. So when you win it 4 out of 5 times, it should be celebrated.
I think it literally was 15 years, right? Because we had the Reese Lloyd game winner in 2003 at the Dome. And then PJ won at Camp Randall in 2018 in his second year here. So I think it was literally 15 years between wins over the Badgers. I mean, that's just
3 different presidential administrations.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, well, and we were just texting last night about Virginia beating Virginia Tech last night, and that was like the second time in 2 decades.
3rd time since 2000.
Yeah.
So they've had it almost as bad as Minnesota had it until recent, when this thing started to trend the other way.
Yeah. So, I mean, and congratulations to Ohio State for snapping a 4-game losing streak against Michigan yesterday.
Things have been really tough for the Buckeyes lately, haven't they? Really tough.
It's just been so rough for them. Feels so bad. Yeah, I mean, I think that probably maybe the most surprising thing about the game yesterday was Wisconsin actually outpassing Minnesota in the game. I think by almost double, it was by double, because I think Lindsey only had 90 yards through the air. There's a lot of dink and dunk stuff for Drake Lindsey yesterday, and that's fine. I mean, with the conditions, I think it just kind of called for that. And Wisconsin's defense is really good. I mean, let's give them some credit. I mean, they're 4-8 this year, but they're not 4-8 because they can't stop anybody. They're 4-8 because they couldn't score for most of the season. And so, yeah, I thought it was the game kind of, especially when we found out that it was going to be, snowy conditions and the weather was going to be sloppy. That game went about how I expected it to go if the Gophers were going to win it. It was going to be low scoring. They were going to have to probably force some turnovers because they're not really a defense that just shuts people down, even bad offenses like Wisconsin. We saw the Badgers kind of move the ball a little bit at times. But the Gophers forced some turnovers. I'm kind of with you. I don't really know what Wisconsin was doing at quarterback. They were kind of putting both guys in and doing some weird Steve Spurrier with the Florida Gators stuff in the 90s where remember back when he had like Doug Johnson and Jesse Palmer like alternating possessions and stuff like that. The difference is that Florida offense was still good. Yeah, I mean, look, you just take the win. You just take the win. You go to 7-5. You and I talked for weeks leading up to this game. You just, under no circumstance, if you're the Gophers, should you lose this game against a Wisconsin team that's down. And you've got to find a way to get to 7 wins. And they did that. And so I think you give them a lot of credit for it. And now we await and see what bowl game it's going to be. And hopefully some guys, decide to play, and we know there's going to be some opt-outs, but it's good to, I think, regardless of how your season goes, it's always good to find a way to beat at least one of your 2 major rivals. And, the Gophers were able to do that. So good on them.
Would you at this point start to count Nebraska as a rival? I think it's more of a friendly rivalry. I think it seems very friendly and cordial, but it definitely feels like a game that both fan bases really want to win, especially, again, when you scan other programs' media and their socials. It seems like one of those games that neither fan base can understand why the other thinks so highly of themselves. And that's generally a sign of a rivalry. I know yesterday on the Wisconsin side, one of the post-game shows that I listened to, Minnesota was referred to as forever the little brother to Wisconsin, which again, maybe in the grand scheme of the millennium, but now Minnesota owns the overall advantage slightly by 1 victory. And again, 4 of the last 5. So little brother may be little, but he's actually probably bigger and stronger at this point than older brother.
Yeah. And excuse me.
Yeah, now you're choked up on one of these pods. It's about time. It's typically me. I've been guzzling coffee since about 6 a.m.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, up until Barry Alvarez took over at Wisconsin in 1990, the Gophers had pretty much historically owned the Badgers. I mean, because the Badgers were really never really a strong program up until Barry Alvarez took over. And then in the 90s, they started winning Big Ten titles and going to Rose Bowls, and they got better players and all that stuff. And eventually it carried on to Brett Bielema and Paul Christian after that. So, I mean, I think overall, historically, it's been a pretty even rivalry. And the only reason why it's even is because of the dominant stretch that Wisconsin had for, like we talked about earlier, that decade and a half from 2003 to 2018 stretch where the Badgers were winning every year and the Gophers had a lot of down years and, bad coaching experiences and just trying to catch up and not really able to get over that hump. But now, as you and I always talk about, the law of averages eventually is going to kick in. This thing is, unless you are just an absolute powerhouse, unless you're in Alabama or a Ohio State or something like that, you're going to have some peaks and some valleys over the course of several decades. Even Alabama before Nick Saban took over in 2007, they were going through some valleys, so to speak. That's how they ended up getting Nick Saban in the first place, because the program had gotten bad. So this stuff kind of evens out over time. And right now, Wisconsin's in a tough way. Luke Fickell's going to come back. He's going to have another year to try and right that ship. But and I want to give Luke Fickell a little bit of credit. We've seen him have success before. I mean, he took Cincinnati to the college football playoff just 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So we know, I don't even think it was that long ago. So we know he's a good coach. I think he's going to do enough to kind of turn things around there. It's just going to be, is there going to be enough patience for them? Are they going to have enough patience to wait for it to turn around? Because, a turnaround for them after going 4-8 this year might be 7-5 next year. Is that fan base going to be satisfied with that? Or are they going to be ready to run him out of town? Because they're ready to run him out of town now.
In 2020, Cincinnati, the COVID year, I believe, that has to be the COVID year, went 9-1, lost in the Peach Bowl. They followed that up in 2021, and they went 13-1, losing in the Cotton Bowl. And then in Luke's final year at Cincinnati, they went 9-3. Remember, he also did spend 1 year as the interim Ohio State football coach. That was back in 2011. They did just go 6-7 that year. On the game specifically yesterday, your brain will be far better at mine than this. But John Nestor's performance yesterday is one of the better performances in recent Gopher memory. He was all over the place with tackles for losses. He had 9 total tackles. He recovered a fumble. He had 2 interceptions. In good conditions or average conditions, that 1 interception might be a pick six. I'm not positive, but it might be. He was as big of a reason, if not the biggest reason, that the Gophers won yesterday. And that has to feel good for him, transferring from Iowa to the University of Minnesota. He goes home with his team. They lose to Iowa badly. He gets injured in the game. He misses last week against Northwestern, and he plays just a phenomenal football game. So hats off to him. And Manny, can co-MVP of the game, and you knew I was going to do this, is co-MVP of the game Tom Weston, who dazzled for the first time in about 5 weeks, 5 punts, 3 inside the 20, and I think they were all inside the 11, I believe.
Thereabouts,
Just putting Wisconsin in a game where field position was probably as important as almost anything. Just kept putting them up against it. I mean, Wisconsin had no field position in the first half. They were lucky to get to half at 10-7 because of that one big play. So I don't think you can talk about the victory yesterday without talking about John Nestor's performance, without talking about what Tom Weston did for his team, putting the defense in advantageous positions most of the game. And oh, by the way, again, we kind of alluded to it, just simply not turning the ball over. If you turn the ball over once or twice inside the 30, inside the 40-yard line, who knows what that does for the Wisconsin offense? So those 3 things to me, incredibly important. And again, the turnover stuff, the penalty stuff, you knew this would come up as well. The Gophers had, maybe this year it was the Northwestern loss. They were largely non-competitive in 3 of the 4 road games. That is all on the head coach. I don't care how much more talent Ohio State and Oregon has. At year 9, you'd really love for the team to look more competitive in those games, even though you and I both suspected that they wouldn't. Okay? So I say all that to say this. This team doesn't win 7 games this year if they aren't disciplined in the penalty aspect, and they don't do things like hold on to the football like they did for the better part of most of the season. That is on coaching and coaching staff, so they should also be lauded for that. And having a team ready to play yesterday that was probably coming in feeling as bad as they have all year with how that game in Northwestern transpired. You have idiots like me calling them soft and borderline embarrassing, and they come out and they do what they need to do to beat your biggest rival. So if I'm going to rip them as much as I did last week, I am going to eat crow and applaud them all across the board today. And I get it. You didn't beat a 10-1 Badger team. I understand that. But imagine the conversation we would be having this morning, Manny, if that game went the other way.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think we would be, in a lot of ways, we would be like the guys you talked about on the Wisconsin side post game. I think we'd be in a lot similar mood to what they were actually in after the game last night. So yeah, I mean, I think you said it. I mean, I think to see them kind of bounce back from the Northwestern game, and look, I think the Northwestern game, you know, the Ohio State blowout, the Oregon blowout, those were kind of expected. I think the performance at Iowa was a low point of the season, and I think losing to Northwestern in the way that you did last week, I think was a low point in the season, because it really kind of, I think the Northwestern game especially highlighted just the shortcomings and the weaknesses that you have on defense, because that's not a team that typically puts a lot of points on the board, and they just absolutely shredded you on defense. Now, not having John Nestor out there might have made a little bit of a difference, but still to sort of rebound, to come home, finish the season strong, win a sloppy, snowy, snot-nosed kind of game against the Badgers, I think is good momentum going forward. And now it's, now I think you just look to figuring out how to sort of build upon that. You want to put together a good performance in a bowl game. P.J. still has yet to lose a bowl game at Minnesota, which is a big thing. In fact, I think his only bowl loss overall was that Cotton Bowl to Wisconsin, his last game at Western Michigan before he came here. So, so that's a kind of a feather in his cap that he can kind of hold on to if he cares about that kind of stuff. I don't know if he really does, but I think you just want to finish the season strong the way that they have and kind of build on that for next year. And hopefully you get a lot of the key players that have performed well for you next year. Hopefully you get them back for next season, and you can try and build on that. And I don't have the 2026 schedule in front of me, but I don't know if it's tougher schedule's pretty tough this year, considered the teams that they lost to. But I think just to win that game, like we said, just find a way to win it. Doesn't matter how you win it. Just win that game yesterday. Don't lose to Wisconsin and Iowa in the same year. That's something that you and I think, historically, for as long as we've known each other and been Gopher fans, that's one of the things that we always hold in high regard. Like, if you can just don't lose to Wisconsin and Iowa both in the same season, when that happens, then it's kind of a letdown. And we've seen numerous seasons where that has happened. I don't know if we have we had a season yet where they've beaten both in the same year yet? Or are we still waiting on that?
I think we're waiting on that, because the year they beat Iowa,
the 12-10 game?
Yeah, they would have lost to Wisconsin that year, because that was 3 years ago. And 3 seasons ago, they lost to Wisconsin. That made up that one win in the last 5 years. If we're wrong, the YouTube audience will correct us in the comments. By the way, if we're wrong on anything, make sure you're commenting, and please weigh in with your thoughts. I want to close on this game, and I think this might get some comments going in the YouTube comment section. Just a couple of things on P.J. Fleck as we put the Wisconsin game to bed, and his recent dominance and the Gophers' recent dominance over Wisconsin. So not only have the Gophers won 4 of the last 5 against Wisconsin, it coincides, Manny, with 4 of the last 5 seasons being pretty good. There's definitely meat that was left on the bone in every season.
Mm-hmm.
To a degree, Manny, that is a credit to the head coach and his program that we would be complaining about meat being left on the bone. In 2021, the team goes 6-3 in conference, 9-4 overall. 2022, 5-4 in conference, 9-4 overall. 2023, 3-6 in conference, down year, 6-7. They go to a bowl game because they're good in the classroom at 5-7. They win that bowl game. As you alluded to, P.J. Fleck 6-0 in bowl games at the University of Minnesota. Last year, 5-4 in Big Ten play, 8-5 overall. This year, again, 5-4. Technically, upper half of the Big Ten, tied for 7th. 5-4 in conference, 7-5 overall. He's 39-40 at the University of Minnesota in Big Ten play. Yes. Is that great? No, it's not. Is it bad? No, it's not. I think he's, again, continued to be a pretty darn good football coach for this university. And if he's back next year, I think you can reasonably expect the record to be semi-similar. I do expect him to be back next year, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the next part of the conversation just becomes, are you happy with 7-5, 8-4? I would say if you get back to one of those 9-win seasons or a 10 or 11-win season in the next season or two, then yes, I'm happy with it. Because even in today's new era of college football, I just don't think Minnesota's ever going to be one of those universities like Indiana and Vanderbilt that all of a sudden pops up and starts winning 10 games a year. For everything we have laid out on this podcast pretty much all season, I think, what does the head football coach say? That these aren't excuses, but they are reasons. There are reasons that hold the University of Minnesota back far more than just the head football coach. He is a part of it. He's not all of it. So I think the conversation just becomes, for people who are maybe tired of 7-5, 8-4, are you happy with that? I would say, I don't know if I'm happy with it, but I understand the alternative can be far worse. And if you're ever going to make a change at some point, you need to be really darn sure you're leveling up at head coach. And I just don't think you can ever make that. And I don't think we appreciate the head coach enough for what he has done.
Yeah, I think it's always a slippery slope when you are not just Minnesota. I think we've seen this happen in other places too. It's a very slippery slope when you are sort of bored or have fatigue with what you've been seeing be kind of a steadily successful program for, a 4 or 5 year period. We saw what happened with Nebraska when you and I've talked about this many times, when Nebraska moved on from Frank Solich way back in the day. And, because they weren't the dominant program that they had been under Tom Osborne. And Frank Solich was winning 9 games a year every year there, and had got them to a national championship game with Eric Crouch. And, but that wasn't, going 9-3 or 10-2 wasn't good enough for that fan base. They wanted him out. And then you get Bill Callahan, and he completely tanks the program. And so, and we saw it again when they brought in Bo Pelini, and then moved on from him because he wasn't winning enough. He was winning, but he wasn't winning enough. And then we saw kind of what has happened to them. And even now with Matt Rule, we don't know if he's really going to turn that around. I think he will, but they went 7-5 this year, so that fan base can't be too happy with what's going on with Nebraska. But yeah, I think it's a slippery slope when you decide to make a change off of emotion, or we can be better, because to your point, if that next guy that you bring in is not better, it's going to set your program back, and then you're scrambling around trying to find the next P.J. Fleck again to try to revitalize it. Or and I think Jerry Kill, when you look back at the Jerry Kill era, he took them out of a really, really bad stretch with Tim Brewster that had gotten bad. But again, to that point, that's how you get Tim Brewsters that come in, is when you decide to make a change because you're kind of tired of going 7-5 or 8-4 or 6-6 every year. You make the change, you move on from Glenn Mason, and then you get Tim Brewster, and it sets your program back. So I think it's one of those things where I think you look at what PJ has done overall as a whole. I think it's been pretty good. I think it's fair to be critical. I think it's fair to expect more and expect, a jump every once in a while. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to have another season like 2019 again. It's a little bit more challenging, and it's a little bit, with NIL and everything, it's a little bit tougher to have those type of seasons if you're Minnesota, but I think it's possible. So I think you just have to kind of keep going with what you got. The stability, I think, overall in the program has been really, really good. And I think that's where PJ, I think, deserves a ton of credit. And, you just hope that I think what you have to hope for right now, just particularly with this group, you hope that Drake Lindsey's just around for 3 more years and he's a part of, building something up to, by the time he's a senior, they are a team that is, at least mildly in the conversation for, getting to the Big Ten championship game. And who knows, by then the college football playoff might be 24 teams because that's what it sounds like they want to go to anyway. And then that'll be a great opportunity for you to get to the playoffs and then see what happens.
I thought about this recently, Manny, because I don't want to speak for you, but I think you and I have largely been, I would have been fine with 8 teams. I don't think FBS college football has to operate the same way as everybody else. I think for many reasons, the sport is just different and should be treated and viewed as different from all the other, we'll call it still college athletics. But at this point, it's obvious we're only going to get more playoff teams. And inevitably, what's going to happen is, I used to think bowl games would go away. They're not. But I think what's going to happen is as you expand to more playoff teams, maybe you get to 24 and that's the number. And then you're still probably going to send, I don't know, 24 to 30 teams to bowl games. And that's essentially your NIT or your, what do we call it now? The crown in college basketball. I guess I don't think bowl games will ever go away because people are going to continue to watch them and they can make money off of them. But it will be interesting to see. Now I'm going to do it. Will a doctor ever just create a pill for morning voice? That's all I ever want. You take a pill every day, your morning voice goes away. And by the way, I'm not dealing with the best pipes to begin with. So now you give me morning voice. I just think people are always going to watch college football. People are always going to settle down and watch 6-6 Western Kentucky take on 6-6 Louisiana Monroe in the Ross Brendel and Manny Hill EA Sports Bowl. People will just do it. So I don't think they're going to give that up, but it will be interesting to see where this thing does continue to go over the next handful of years. Let's do this briefly, Manny. You and I, we're going to spend more time in the coming days, probably after next week. We'll start talking more about Gopher basketball. I think right now with this group of players, I think the plan is for us to try and convene once a week, maybe more when it warrants it. I would say for the Gopher basketball team, Manny, I would say the season's gone exactly as I would expect it to. I mean, maybe skewed slightly worse, but I just don't know. And this is not an indictment on Niko. He got here late. It's year 1. I understand you can turn things around quickly. But again, for all the reasons I've talked about, I don't think you can turn it around as quickly at the University of Minnesota as maybe you can at other programs. I believe in Niko long-term. Niko should get really a full 3 years before we really evaluate this thing. But I thought when you combine the non-conference schedule with the Big Ten schedule, if this team went near 500, it would be a really good season. Manny, if this team now goes near 500, they should throw the guy a damn parade. Because I know the last couple of games they've been up against it with injuries. But again, I'm going to sound snarky here. But I think everybody would agree your best player you got in the transfer portal was probably Cade Tyson. Let's just say it's Cade Tyson. I think
he's their best player. Yep. It's not even close.
So he averaged 2.5 points at North Carolina last year. Why would you think he would just show up to the Big Ten and drag this team to 7 or 8 wins like Jordan Murphy did a few times, right? I just don't think that was going to happen. So I'm not down on the team. I'm not going to be angry about anything this year. When they win games, I think I'll be more excited than just normal wins. I just want to I want to see the things that don't matter. When it comes to wins are what matters the most. But do you know what I want to see, Manny? I want to see guys playing hard. I want to see program buy-in. And I want to see some small signs that this program is going to where we want it to be, which for me, Manny, is at some point, this team should consistently make the tournament every other year or 2 out of 3 years. History and logic tells you this is not a program that can go to the NCAA tournament every year. If they do, again, throw Niko a parade. I'm not saying that he can't or that they won't, but even if they can get to a point of going to the NCAA tournament once every 2 years, that is this thing working at levels that have never happened before. So let's give it time. But I think this year has the potential to be comedically bad in the wins and loss column.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially the next couple of games where you got Indiana on Wednesday, and then you're off for a week, and then you've got the number one team in the country that you have to play on the road. That's going to be fun. The best team in the Big Ten, best team in the country, Purdue. So yeah, and then things might get a little bit easier with Texas Southern and Campbell and Fairleigh Dickinson going to be on the schedule as well, and hopefully you can pick up some wins.
This is a family podcast, Manny. You can't say words like that.
So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, at this point, it kind of looks like they have really, all due respect for the entire roster, they have really one good player. And to your point about Cade Tyson, he was a role player with North Carolina last year. Didn't play a lot after having a couple seasons at Belmont where he was a double digit 15, 16 point per game scorer. And so I think the expectation that he's just going to drag this roster to 17 or 18 wins, I think is really not very realistic. So I think what we see in the non-conference is that this is going to be a bit of a struggle. I think what you have to hope for over the course of the season is just steady improvement. Like you said, be competitive in some of these games, play hard, take care of the ball, try to stay as healthy as you can, and get through the season. And if you find a way, if you find yourself, 14 and 15 or something like that at the end of the year, I don't think that's really very realistic at this point based on what I've seen. But if you can get to 500 or relatively close to being at 500, I think that's a really successful first season for Niko. But I will say, I mean, look, there is a reason, to your point about going to the NCAA tournament every other year, if you can get to that point, there is a reason why you brought Niko Medved in. There's a reason why you moved on from Ben Johnson and went the route of getting Niko Medved in. Obviously, his ties to the university in the past were a big part of that, but he has had success at other places. So the thought is that he can come in and, eventually over the course of time, get them to a point where they're competitive and at least in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten. And then I think at that point you have to, if you're a Gopher fan, I think you have to be realistic about, much like what we talked about with football, you've got to be realistic about what your program is. And if you can find some stability, stay kind of, if Niko over the course of the next handful of years can get this program to the point where they're going 9-11 or 10-10 in the Big Ten, I think that's a really, really strong, stable program. And then once in a while, you hope, he gets some good transfers, gets a good roster, and, they're finishing in the upper half and at least competing for the conference title and getting a decent seed in the NCAA tournament. And then you kind of see what happens. But it's going to take some time, and I think people are going to need to be patient and not ready to run him out of town if they're not making the NCAA tournament, and going, if they're not going, 24-8 and going to and they're a 3 or 4 seed in the NCAA tournament in 2 years, I hope that people are not ready to run Niko Medved out of town.
Well, and again, just like football, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect, Manny, to your point, that you can at some point. Richard Pitino was able to do this. Get yourself a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament when the roster really clicks and maybe some players have stayed in the program and matured, and you pair that with some transfer portal players and maybe you get some more NIL investments. So I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm just saying until it really starts to change and the program starts to go to the NCAA tournament every year, I don't think that that should be the expectation. And I do fully believe that Niko has as good of a chance as anybody to win here because he understands probably what it takes, and to a degree, he understands what it doesn't take, right? He's seen what other people have tried. He's been a part of what other people have tried. He's also had success at previous stops before, non-traditional basketball programs, and taken them to NCAA tournaments. So this largely, Manny, puts a wrap on Gopher football recaps. I think you and I, if the schedules align, we'll get together, maybe do a quick bowl preview. I do want to mention my good buddy Daniel House from gophersguru.com. We used to do a thing every year going all the way back to the original SKOR North Gophers show into my now defunct podcast, Minnesota Sports Chat, where we would preview every college football bowl game in the first round of the college football playoffs. We have had introductory discussions to make that happen. So I look forward to Daniel House hopping on here. And when I say preview, I'll be honest, it's a very quick preview. You can't do 72 games in a tidy podcast. And I know it's not 72 games. That is hyperbole there. And I also know it's not hyperbole, it's hyperbole. That is the full pot of coffee and being up way too early this morning talking. I do want to mention as well, Manny, they're still up against it for making the NCAA tournament, likely going to need to win the Big Ten hockey conference tournament. But your Gopher hockey program playing a lot better. They get Ohio State next weekend. Then they're off for a month because for some reason college hockey takes basically all of December off, but college basketball doesn't. Make that make sense to me. I do plan to have perhaps Jess Myers or somebody on to talk some Gopher hockey, because those who know me know that if I had to rank my loves in this town, Gopher hockey is very high on that list, which made the start of this season very painful, but they've played a lot better over the last month. So looking forward to talking more hockey and basketball on this show. And Manny, we're going to talk plenty of basketball, but we may just have to be a bit more selective about when we talk about it this year. But we will definitely talk about it. And Gophers 101 is going nowhere. This will be a weekly podcast, sometimes more when it warrants it. Manny, I want to thank you for being a part of these. We've had some really late nights, some really early mornings, but overall a very fun season, and very appreciative of those who have watched on the SKOR North YouTube channel and those who have listened either via the Gophers 101 or Minnesota Sports with Mackie and Judd podcast feeds. Manny and I don't get to have fun and do this without people interacting, paying attention. And even if you think I'm terrible and Manny is the GOAT, which he is, you can hate comment me all you want, or you can tell me how great I am. It doesn't mean anything without people consuming the product. So thank you very much for doing that. And a big thanks to you, Manny. I do think when you and I get together the next time, we are back to Manny Mania. I think we need to do a random Gopher football or basketball season recall. We're a little overdue for that at this point.
I'm down for it. Let's do it. You know, maybe leading up, maybe that week leading up to the bowl game, we can do that. Or, you know, after the bowl, recap the bowl game or something, we can do that. And then, you know, when we get further into basketball season, we might need to do some random season recalls, you know, by the way this thing is trending.
All random season recalls all the time, with a slight emphasis on the recent games. Very quickly on bowl projections this morning, I have seen the Gophers in Nashville with LSU. Who knows what the LSU roster looks like at that point? I have also seen Gophers in the Pinstripe Bowl against Georgia Tech. Who knows what the Georgia Tech roster looks at that point? I have a hard time believing Haynes King plays in that game. Although, actually, I take that back. Haynes still has eligibility left, doesn't he?
I thought he was a senior this year.
Okay. Maybe you're right. You're almost always right. So we'll dig more into that. I've also seen, by the way the Big Ten selects, and a lot of this is going to have to do with the college football playoff. There's even been still some mention of Detroit. What a shame if this team goes 7-5 and winds back up in Detroit. But it would also be quite hilarious to be there for the fourth time in a decade. So,
and by the way, Haynes King is a senior, and I would hope so, because he's 24. He's going to be 25 years old in January.
Oh, very quickly. Let's close with this, completely off topic and not Gophers related at all. You thought we had it bad in the elements yesterday in Dinkytown. Did you see Champaign, Illinois yesterday, Manny?
I did not see that. I saw that. I saw just based off the score that the game was a little sloppy, but
they had 9+ inches of snow. They closed down one half of the stadium, so everybody had to sit on one side of the stadium. And when I say everybody, I mean all of like 350 people who made it to the game through 9 inches of snow. I think the only people who made it to the game, Manny, you had to be living in Champaign proper or at the university. They were showing some pictures and just looking at the stadium, it looked like not even. And Champaign, by the way, you and I have been there. Yeah. Is truly in the middle of nowhere. It is a college town. It's a beautiful college town. It's a great place. If Gophers fans ever have a chance to go to Memorial Stadium, they should. It's very cool.
Do the walk with the marching band to the stadium.
Just like we did. We were members of the marching band. We walked right in. But not an easy place to get to when 9 inches of snow is dumped on the ground. So it was actually kind of brought back some memories, Manny. It looked like a COVID game when they would pan back. There was like nobody in the crowd
too, right?
It was a night game.
Night?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Nobody in the crowd. And
I have to look at those
actually
highlights.
Pretty big for Gophers fans that Illinois ended up winning, because if Northwestern have the same record as the Gophers, that could make bowl placement a little bit tricky. So maybe Northwestern winds up in Detroit. We'll see. All that will work itself out after championship weekend.
And at the end of the day, it would have been nice to not lose to Northwestern. That would have been helpful as well.
Why, Manny? Because 8-4 sounds a lot better than 7-5. But you know what?
You got that right.
7-5 with the axe sounds a lot better than 6-6 and without it. So we will be happy with what we got, and we will put a wrap on this edition of Gophers 101. But don't worry, Manny Hill will be back with me basically in perpetuity talking Gophers athletics. So for Manny Hill, I'm Ross Brendel. Please, if you are listening to this podcast, please rate and review kindly on your podcast platform. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and no matter how you're consuming, if you're a Gopher fan and you know a Gopher fan, please tell your friends, your family, all your fellow fans all about Gophers 101. It is still the best way to spread the news and spread the joy of Gophers 101.